Good afternoon and welcome to a conversation about children and adolescent mental health. My name is Elizabeth Link and I'm the Associate Pastor for Christian Education here at Second Presbyterian Church in Roanoke. I'm delighted that you've joined us today. I give thanks for Doug Settles, who's coordinating our sound for this event, to Andrea Boone for her work with the live stream video. We also have with us church member Ginger Avis, who is fielding the live YouTube feed. So if you have any questions as this conversation rolls on, you may enter them into the live chat feature, and Ginger will do her best to field those questions. We ask for your patience because we are all very new at this, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that do pop up. We thank you especially, though, for your interest. I'm grateful to have with us Sarah Bishop, and Sarah is a church member here. She's a licensed professional counselor and a certified substance abuse counselor. Sarah has over 15 years of work experience with children, youth, and families, and currently provides outpatient counseling services at a local agency. I've known Sarah since our involvement with the young adult program here at Second many years ago, and with her faithful leadership in our children's Sunday school program here at the church. We have already had a couple of live stream conversations here in recent weeks, and before we get too far into today's topic, I want to make sure that everyone knows that our next conversation will actually be coming up a week from today, on June the 10th, Wednesday at noon, a conversation with Dr. William Lee on racism in America and the aftermath of George Floyd's death. It is our hope that these conversations may be timely and important to the concerns that we are facing today. So a few weeks ago, the other pastors and I considered what needs we were noticing from among the parents and grandparents in our community. And it seemed important to me that we tackle the issue of children's and adolescent mental health. As a parent and as a pastor, one of the greatest concerns I have in the midst of all these social and physical changes, as necessary as they are for everyone's health, is the effect that it all may be having on our children. As a mom, I want to do what I can to support the physical, emotional, and mental health and the well-being of my child. And I've heard similar shared concerns from many of you. And that's why we're here today. For those of you who have not taken part in these conversations in the past, we have a series of questions that have been submitted ahead of time, and we'll also do our best to incorporate those questions that Ginger receives on the YouTube feed. So like I mentioned, if you're watching and questions arise, please type those in. Ginger will be monitoring as we go along. Let's get started. Sarah, tell us a little bit about your role as a counselor and how that's changed these past couple of weeks and months since the pandemic has begun.
So I provide outpatient counseling services to children, youth, and families, and we see children at our agency ages 3 to about age 20, depending on the situation and the services that are needed. Once COVID-19 happened and face-to-face was not available, we went one day from seeing clients face-to-face all day and the very next day to telehealth, where everything was online, on Zoom. So we went from seeing our clients in person to seeing them in their homes. And it actually was very much a smooth transition. And I was wondering how telehealth could be effective, and it actually has been very effective. And I think the clients are so glad that they're still able to receive their services, and I have such gratitude that we can still provide that service and give that to those people who are in need. It's been wonderful.
And it's so important right now. Well, you're a mom.
Yes.
So without going into too much detail, of course, would you mind sharing with us what's most important to you about your child's mental health?
Absolutely. I want my child to have joy in life. And you cannot always protect your children from adverse childhood experiences, and when they happen in life, what I hope for my daughter and for the children that I serve is that I can teach resilience, so that if they have these experiences, that they can find a way to process, to cope, to heal, to move forward, and still find joy in life.
Joy and resilience.
Yes.
Resilience is a good key word for me to hold on to as a mom.
Yes.
We know that a parent's stress and anxiety can often set the emotions within a household. This has been made all the more evident to me over this past week as I'm realizing how much our 2-year-old is absorbing from our conversations around the house about things happening in recent news events. So what can parents do to keep a healthy perspective in this pandemic season to model safe, healthy responses in a stressful time?
I love this question. I love the word perspective in this question. I think keeping this pandemic and the stressors that are happening in perspective can be helpful. I also think that a parent's ability to self-regulate directly impacts your child's ability to self-regulate. They are going to model so much of what they see around them. And so your ability to process, educate your children, validate their feelings, and show them that you can also be resilient and move forward in life is a key here. And so making that happen for them, I think, is very important.
That's good feedback to hear. Well, we all know that children and adolescents are social beings. It's natural that peer relationships become more important as children grow. So what does it mean for these social creatures to be socially isolated from their peers? And should we be concerned about developmental issues because of isolation?
This is such a great question, and I think it really depends on your child. In my experience working with adolescents, they have a face-to-face social network, and then they have an online social network. I even work with some kids who their only social connections are online. So during COVID, they actually are like, I mean, life is the same for me. And, you know, they're not as affected as maybe other kids. But I think if you see that this is an issue or a concern for you, discuss this with your child. See if it's a concern for them as well. And help them identify their choices. You know, you can choose to be a little more social or not. And if it really is a concern, you know, there are options like if you know that there's another child or a group of children who are practicing social distancing, or if that's one of your family values right now and something you want to promote, maybe those kids are able to social distance together and kind of have an opportunity to hang out.
Yeah.
I think it just kind of depends on your family, your values, you know, who at your home could be more at risk, how are you going to manage that? And we have another question similar to this, I think, that I can talk more about too later.
Great, great. In fact, my husband recently read an article that talks about your COVID bubble. You know, so
Yes.
like what is the bubble you've created for your family? And then maybe finding a family with similar age children to yours that maybe you can kind of trust one another, that they're keeping the same values, like you say, and the
Yes.
same practices, so that maybe that's a safe group to let into your COVID bubble.
Yes.
What a weird thing to talk about. First of all, we were talking about
Your COVID bubble.
Well, so these next two questions come from a parent of a younger elementary student. And this writer has a daughter who's 7 years old and is an only child. The biggest struggle that they've experienced with the quarantine is their collective need for their child to play with others. So it says that they're trying, and but their daughter's lonely, and screen time can only go so far. She wrote that, plus her brain falls out of her ears during screen time. So are there any thoughts or any recommendations for parents like this who are worried about their kids getting too much screen time or how they're going to interact?
Absolutely. And I completely understand about the screen time. I find that it can also lead to more irritability in children and self-esteem even issues, like compounded on all of what we're dealing with already. And again, I think it would go right back to the COVID bubble. You know, can you identify maybe a family friend or a cousin who is social distancing that you're comfortable with, that you can set up as many play dates as possible during this time to have that social interaction, and see if that could be helpful. And, you know, maybe even people here at church that you know that you could reach out to.
Yeah, it's almost like you're interviewing another
You-
family unit to see
Yes.
if you can let them into your bubble. But
Have you traveled in the past 14 days? If you
Right.
plan to, we won't have a play date right now.
That's right.
All of those things, yes.
check your temperature at the playground gate, or maybe not playground gate, your backyard gate.
Yeah.
This same parent had another great question, and she says that she tends to think that telling her 7-year-old the truth about things that are happening in the news, like for instance the recent death of George Floyd and the deaths that are caused by COVID, are the right way to go, to be truthful. But she's starting to second guess herself just as things amplify.
Yeah.
And she's wondering if she's creating some kind of lifelong fear or anxiety.
I just want to thank you for this question. I think it is so important during this time. I mean, just with coronavirus, but then this added element of sadness and disappointment and fear. I think discussing these issues based on truth is very important. I think you want to consider your child's age and personality as well. So if you know that your child may be able to take a certain amount of information, and what is the message that you really want to give your child is kind of where I would keep your focus. Monitor your own, I guess, motives and well-being there too. If you know that you are very, feeling very emotional, but the bottom line is you want your child to also get this message of love and kindness and how we want to treat each other and how we want to be safe. Have that be your message. And if you know your child's personality and their developmental age, that's how you're going to try to get your message across. And if you're worried that you're instilling fear, life is scary sometimes. And I think it's okay to let your children see that you sometimes are fearful and angry or sad, and then also telling them that it's okay to feel your feelings. And we're still going to talk about the message here is love and kindness, if that's what your family message is trying to be here, and hope and safety and what type of values we are going to make sure that we have in our family and that we give to the world. But have your message, that would be my suggestion, have your message be that bottom line there.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, in general, social media adds a whole other level to adolescence in today's world. And I, for one, am very grateful that I did not grow up in the era of social media where I'm constantly comparing myself to my peers, but also seeing those things that I'm being left out of things that are happening socially without me. And it's particularly difficult for families right now that are taking precautions seriously, while others aren't forcing their children to make any lifestyle changes at all. How can parents stay firm in their household rules, like wearing a mask or social distancing, when their neighbors are letting their children run around with life as usual?
Absolutely. This is a real concern. And, I think a lot of what I will teach in my own practice with families and children is, what can you control? And so you can set your values and your rules within your household, but you really don't have ultimate control if people are going to be leaving the house and going out and coming back. So you may consider, if your concern is the risk of coronavirus, that social distancing from your teen almost in a way. So if you know that your teen is going out and doing that and you're concerned, you may not be hugging and kissing them every day if this is kind of the choice they make. If this is the value, again, that your family is most concerned about. Or if you know that there's someone in your household that is of significant risk, and again, your teen is going out and you can't control what happens when they're gone, when they come in, you may say, hey, look, you can't hug and kiss grandma. You're going to have to maintain a social distance. This is just what we're going to do. This is what we can control. Outside of that, locking them in probably isn't going to work. But this is a real concern. And again, you've got to do, or identify your choices as a family and your values and have that discussion and then do what you can for now. Mm-hmm. And let's hope that this is temporary and this will pass. But this is a real tough issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel for parents of middle school and high school age children in particular. My daughter's 2 years old, and so in the large part, her life has been unaffected, really, by all these social changes. And she's getting tired of just seeing her dad and me all the time. But we got a puppy, so that helps add to the mix. But with these teenagers, they're seeing on all that they're missing out on. And I've heard from a lot of parents who feel like their kids have been really good until now. And at this stage in the summer, when people are taking beach trips with tons of peers or going to the lake with lots of friends, it's really hard for them to say no. And so I hope that families who are out there listening know that we think about you, we care about you, we know the struggle is hard.
Absolutely.
And so, like you say, doing the best that you can is all you can do.
That's really it.
Communicating is important, and that's great.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I have a 2-year-old, and I really hadn't taken her out into the world very much during all this pandemic. It's been pretty easy. We have a fenced-in backyard. We walk around the neighborhood. But a few weeks ago, it's probably been about a month ago now, she had to go to the ENT for a checkup. And it did not occur to me until we got there that she had not seen people in masks before. So we walk into the waiting room, and they actually had people in their waiting room, but they were all in masks, and she was scared. I just hadn't thought to prepare her for that. She'd seen her dad and I wear masks when we come and go from the store, that kind of thing, but she'd not been in a room full of strangers with masks. And so it's made me wonder, what does this mean for development of children in these important stages of life as they're growing, when facial expressions are so important for interpreting what another person means, or maybe their good or ill intent? Is there any concern with children developmentally about their long-term effects with everyone masked?
You know, there are studies about very depressed parents or parents that use substances that have a very flat affect, and that, you know, long-term for children, they may have, you know, poor social skills, or they don't have the same affect as their peers, or, you know, it can affect that. At the same time, we also know that parents who get treatment or can resolve some of those issues, children are resilient, and so are adults, you know, and that those things can be corrected and come back around. Will there be long-term effects, you know, for this? I'm not sure, but I do know that, you know, hopefully at home, children are able to see their parents' expressions, maybe when they're socializing with their peers. I know, you know, especially little children are not wearing masks, most of them. So with their peers, I think maybe there's a better outcome there. But with adults, it'll be something, you know, I want to see what happens. But hopefully they're spending most of their time with people that are not masked. But I love that you thought, you know, I forgot to prepare her. And I never think of that either. So, you know, maybe also if you have young children saying, hey, by the way, we're going to be wearing these masks. It's just such a weird and different time. When I hear my daughter use the word pandemic, I'm just like, what?
Yeah,
you know,
they know that word.
They know that word. And, you know, they talk about, well, when coronavirus ends, that's what my daughter says. Well, when coronavirus ends and we can go to this, that, and the other. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. You know, it will end and we will get through this. I just think trying to do the best we can for now is important.
Yeah.
And maybe when you are home and you don't have that mask on, you know, practice expressions. There are some great books, and they're even on YouTube, so they can be read to your children on YouTube, but about feelings, about socialization, friends, expression. And one of them is called The Way I Feel. I cannot remember the author at this moment, but The Way I Feel. And it's such a fun book, and I'll use that with my clients sometimes, and we read through the characters and we act out the feelings and expressions. And that might be something too in this time that you can use to really help your child remember that we do have feelings and expressions, and we can talk and learn about these as other ways to cope.
That's a great suggestion. And it makes me feel a lot better as a parent. I mean, just to be reminded that, you know, our little girl spends the majority of time with us in a house, and we're not wearing masks in there. Right. So she really is reading so much through our emotions and our communication. I'm totally going to get that book.
It's a great one. It's
and
got
the
a lot
idea
of use.
of acting out emotions.
Yes.
That's so, I never would have thought of that. So I'm going to add that to my little back pocket to remember my
Role
toolbox.
play is wonderful with children.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great and encouraging. Well, another parent wrote in about his 7th grade daughter. And this particular instance recounts just the daughter's anxiety around going to sleep at night. And the anxiety really only arose during the time of this stay-at-home order. It's not something that she'd experienced before. And the parents have tried really hard not to watch the news or to make sure they talk about these things. They don't want to talk about them in front of her, but of course they live in the same house, and she walks in and sees things on the news or overhears a conversation. In addition to that, she's just very intuitive. She can tell when they're anxious or when they're stressed. Again, the emotions of the parents just ooze out through the whole house.
Right.
And the good things about the shelter in place is they feel like she's benefited from more family time together and a slower pace of schedule. But it's just when that end of the day comes and bedtime shows up, she gets nervous about going to sleep. And they write that the girl's mom has tried breathing exercises and things before bed, but they just want to know what they can do to help their daughter feel heard and understood, that they see that she's anxious because it's very real to her, and if there's anything they can do to help calm her in this stressful time.
Absolutely. Thank you for this question. The breathing exercises and relaxation are great. Good job. Think about exercise too. A lot of the times anxiety is built up stress within our bodies, and back in the caveman days when we were anxious, we would fight it out or run it out. It's kind of that flight or fight experience. And now we're sedentary, and so a lot of anxiety builds up, and you want to be able to have a physical activity to alleviate that. So I'd also suggest exercise and self-care. Avoiding caffeine and sugar, watching nutrition. Those are just some of the basics to help manage anxiety. And then if possible, see if you can help your daughter maybe identify an unhelpful thought or thoughts she's having and write them down. And then you're going to help her see how that can connect to a feeling and a behavior of maybe being fearful and anxious. And then try to help her revise that unhelpful thought into a more helpful one. But validating the feelings, like you said, absolutely. So when she maybe identifies that unhelpful thought, validate it. Absolutely. Put yourself in their shoes and say, I get it. And even if you don't get it, you're going to say you get it.
It's a fake
and you're going to really try to understand, and then help them, reframe that into something more helpful and how that may help the feelings and then the behaviors that come with that. But it also sounds like that your daughter is very attuned to what you all feel as parents, as you had mentioned. And so I do think, again, what we had talked about maybe in the very first question of a parent's ability to self-regulate is directly going to affect your child's ability to do that. So maybe having a conversation that, we feel this too, and it's okay, and then this is how we might try to help ourselves as a family and move forward with what we're all going through. But I wanted to say that's really great self-awareness as parents, to know that it's possibly your anxiety too that is contributing to your daughter's anxiety. Good job.
That's great. Well, that's good advice for me too. I mean, I really realized recently that I was not exercising at all. I mean, aside from the walk down the street with our kid or around the block, I was not exercising, and normally that's a part of my regular routine, is to go to a class at the Y. And without those classes and set schedule, I am really good about skipping it.
Yes.
And just last week, I decided I've got to make myself get out and walk, exercise, get sweaty, because there is something about physical activity that kind of helps you get above the fog that you can just live in when you're just in your house and in your little square corner all the time.
That's right. And I believe the Greenway has reopened, if I'm not mistaken.
Good.
Did it?
I don't know.
I think it did.
I hope
but
so.
there's so many other places to bike as well. I know that I had my bike completely tuned up. I upgraded my daughter's bike to the next size, and we are on our bikes when it is nice out. And you can't catch coronavirus if you're on a bike. I mean, you're just out there doing your thing.
Good advice. And I also really like what you say about writing it down, about helping your child kind of put into words really enough to be able to write it down what they're feeling. I'm not a journaler. I've tried at different stages of my life, and it's just not a natural thing for me.
Yeah.
But a lot of my work is writing, and so I do have to condense things that are in my head into words on a page so I can communicate them to people in a sermon or in a lesson or in a prayer, and that is so helpful for me when it comes to my own theology and my understanding about God's movement in the world. So, of course, that would help me when I'm trying to understand my own feelings and emotions, to put words to paper, I think can help condense things, and it's much more manageable, I guess, when you see the words written down. Maybe it's not so big and scary anymore.
Gets out of your head and onto the paper.
Yeah. Well, this is not exactly what we're talking about, but I think that could be a really great prayer practice for a family, is before bed, especially if that tends to be a time when people's minds are racing. Mine often do before bed.
Yes.
But to write down those concerns, those fears and anxieties, and trust that God has them tonight while you sleep.
Right.
So, good. You're helping more than adolescents and children here, Sarah. Well,
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Moving to our next question, I heard from another family, and this family has 2 teenagers, and the family stayed home as soon as it was mandated to do so, and they've been really careful, and their kids don't really seem to mind being at home. In fact, they've begun to feel really home and safe there. And this particular mom is noticing that her kids are not interested in leaving the house now. So they don't want to go interact with peers, even if it's in that little COVID bubble of circle of family or friends. They're afraid to go to the store. There's just seems to be anxiety around going out in public, even if they're wearing masks and other people are wearing masks. So the mom writes that they seem to be happy, but they're anxious about leaving home. So how do we handle this? We clearly want them to be happy at home, but we also want them to live without this fear and anxiety about going out into the world.
Yes, and I love this question, and I want to validate this parent, and I also want to validate these kids. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it is so awkward going out in the community in a mask.
That's true.
It's just totally awkward, and it's not comfortable. And teens, I mean, come on, like, now when these masks become a fashion statement, and who has the cool one, and what does it say, and is it blinged out? Yes. You are probably going to see your kids a little more comfortable wearing masks. But right now, I mean, it hasn't even been 3 months that we've really been quarantining and really trying to social distance. So I do think it's going to be an adjustment. And, gosh, right, enjoy being home with your kids. I hope that we never have to experience something like this again in our lifetimes. But enjoy it. And if you're really concerned, that there's something, some intense anxiety, after you feel like they should be adjusting, you can always seek consultation with a therapist. And we're going to talk a little more about that, I think, towards the end of, if you would like to see a therapist, how do you go about doing that? Mm-hmm. But, again, I think we're all still adjusting in this time.
Yeah. And I guess that just goes to say, like, each of us is different in our timeline to readjust to whatever the new normal is, and then hopefully someday the normal
right,
way down the road. It just may take more time for people, and just being in tune with where your kids are and if they need additional help or you need additional help as they evolve along with all these changes.
That's right.
Well, one parent asks, what conversations should we be having with our teenage children about the possibility of us, their parents, getting sick with COVID-19? Mm-hmm. What if they get sick?
Similar to the question asked earlier about, telling the truth, I would also just say tell the truth here as well, based on your child's age and personality, what you want to share with them. Maybe review the CDC facts. Plan as a family. What would we do if someone got sick? Let's just think about that as a family. Talking about these things and having some tentative plans in place may alleviate anxiety. Getting the facts, having an understanding of what we can do together may be helpful. But remember to validate, discuss choices and options, revise unhelpful thoughts into helpful ones during this time. Mm-hmm. But absolutely, I think, being open and honest, try not to think the worst. I would also suggest many times the most scary things we think of and the things that we want to plan for never happen. So try to keep it in perspective, as we've already talked about, and really make a plan that makes sense for you and your family.
Yeah. I recently had a nurse friend tell me that we should be cautious, not scared. Yeah. And that's kind of become my recent mantra in these last couple of weeks, is to be cautious, take the precautions that I can, what I can do for my family, but not be scared so that anxiety seeps out into relationships, with children or with your spouse or partner. And I know my husband and I have talked about what would happen if we were sick. We don't have family in the area, and so there are a lot of people, especially this day and age. Not everyone lives close to grandparents or aunts and uncles nearby, and just our talking through it out loud has helped me think, okay, if we're sick enough and one of us can't be here or both of us couldn't be, what would our plan be? And I don't think it would ever come to that, but just talking that through a couple months ago helped me just to know, our child's not going to be home alone with a bowl of food or something, waiting for someone to take care of her.
I'll tell you, during coronavirus, I was working from home, and so I was seeing all my clients on Zoom in a private space where we live, and my daughter was homeschooling in the other room. Whew, that was challenging. And I would set up a row of snacks on the bottom of the fridge, and then all the dry snacks and her beverages outside the fridge. And I would say, okay, I will be in here for about 45 minutes, give or take. Help yourself. If it's really an emergency, come get me.
Yeah.
And it worked. But boy, it was a lot of preparation and a lot of it was stressful, but we made it work. And so I had to share that as you were talking about, well, where's
great.
Eleanor going to be? Fending for herself.
Yes, a little free-range parenting for short windows
Yes.
of time. And like many parents experienced during this pandemic, as soon as childcare facilities closed and schools closed, there was no backup plan for childcare. And so my husband and I, for weeks and weeks, did the whole shift, where one of us works from 6 to 9 and the other one from 9 to noon. And then during nap time, we're lucky enough that our child still naps. But so many parents have lots of children and children who do not nap, or they're homeschooling their kids. And that does add a layer of stress and anxiety in a household between parents, and then between parents and children. Like you said, they can feel that. And so finding what are the right values and the right rhythm for where we are now is a healthy transition. But I feel like we're coming out of that fog where we just made do and just, manned all decks. Well, let's talk for a moment about loss and grief.
Yes.
So in our church family, we've had teenagers who have missed out on traditional rites of passage like prom or the celebrated end of a sports season or graduation. We've also had members who lost grandparents during this season where they haven't had the traditional rites like funeral services and memorials where they've been able to gather together with friends and family in such a large way to share memories. We even have church members who've had to make changes to wedding plans. I mean, these things have affected so many stages of life stages and big events. So what are some ways as we as adults can help acknowledge the losses experienced in this season to better help our young people cope and grieve?
Well, I think these are such great losses and disappointments during this time. Events, ceremonies, graduations, memorials help us really prepare, process, celebrate, grieve, heal, and move forward, and helps us identify hope for the future. So this is a really complicated grief time, I think, during COVID-19. So maybe creating a meaningful way to acknowledge any of these events could be helpful. Check in with your child, your family, and yourself. What do you feel? What do they feel? What do they need? What do they desire? I think a big part in a lot of the discussions that we've had today too, are just understanding that your needs may not be the same as your child. Your expectations may not be the same as your child. Watch your should statements. Well, we should have done it this way, or it should have been this way. It could have been, and it wasn't. And it's okay to feel the disappointments and feel all of those feelings that come with all of these changes. And just remember too, though, that maybe the way you might feel about it could be different than your child feels about it or what they need. Try to identify a plan and realize that if it's not perfect, it's okay. What is the bottom line here? What is the message that you want to get through, for yourself or for your child about a loss or a graduation? And again, make sure that comes through more so than the disappointment or the grieving. Those, we're going to feel all those too, and make sure your message gets through. It's okay to feel disappointed. I put some notes here, maybe, a simple service in nature for a memorial, family prayer times about things, and keep checking in, checking in every once in a while. Hey, I just want to check in, are you okay? How are you feeling about your drive-by graduation? Or how are you feeling about not ending the sports season, or how are you feeling, or, about the loss of our loved one and that we couldn't celebrate, and, a big gathering. And the other thing I want to just say too during this time is that I think, we are all home together a lot more, and I find sometimes that parents and even children become concerned when there's too many feelings. We're seeing a lot of feelings. It is okay to feel. And I know that's a very typical thing for a therapist to say, because we're all about feelings, but stick with those feelings. It's okay to feel. And if you see your child or a loved one having a lot of ups and downs, that's okay. This is a very stressful time. There are a lot of things that everyone is going through. I would say that if you feel like someone really cannot cope ongoing, and you see that it's affecting them socially, academically, occupationally, that would be a time to consult with a therapist, just to say, and it might be 1 to 3 sessions just to check in and see, okay, do I really need some services here, or is this okay based on the circumstances of what we're going through? But yeah, all these losses and disappointments are real.
Yeah.
It is.
Since I have been walking this last week or two, I have noticed in my neighborhood how many graduates, like high school graduates and college graduates, they are just blocks within my house. And I see the signs, sometimes with their graduation picture and cap and gown, that they didn't get to wear at the ceremony, and sidewalk chalk celebrating them and everything. And it does make me realize that I, as the larger community member, really need to make a bigger deal than maybe I normally would about a neighbor's graduation, because they're not having the graduation party that I had when I was in high school, and not getting the same group photos and things. And anyway, it's just, I'm grateful for the visual ways that our community has acknowledged some life achievements like that, like graduation, because that's such a simple thing to put a sign in the yard, but it has made me aware of who in my neighborhood has lost something this spring and maybe needs a little extra attention or an extra pat on the back or cheer. And especially thinking about those children who've lost grandparents in this season, this is a time, I think, where the family really has to be the church for their children. And that's hard, too, when the family is grieving. And I think that maybe one of the things I could do better as a pastor is helping equip parents for this time, how to have these conversations about what is life beyond this life, and what are some ways you can share those memories that maybe would have been shared in a more public memorial service. How are some ways that we can write those down maybe and share them and give thanks for them, because we are kind of in uncharted waters here, and maybe we have to find new ways to mark these things.
Absolutely.
So another good reminder for me. Well, one of the questions I wanted to be sure we covered was what kind of tools you would recommend for our toolbox as parents. What kind of things do we want to keep in our back pockets to help us to remain calm and supportive to our children in this time? So maybe there's some exercises we could do. You mentioned some already. Some things that we can try for ourselves or with our children.
Yeah. I think starting with basic self-care, nutrition, water, exercise, sleep, those are going to be your basics. Start there. If you know that that's an area that you could really focus on, that already will benefit you. And then beyond that, there is prayer, meditation, mindfulness, relaxation. I think with coronavirus, one of the thoughts I had was it's almost like we're going into the desert, and it's like time that you can really connect with God. And then again, with the most recent events that have happened, we also don't want to just stay in the desert. We want to be able to share with our community some pain and suffering that we're having. And so I would really just say, connect with God and find out what is God's will for you, for your family, for your community, for the country, for the world, and stay connected to that. I mean, I think if we can all kind of find that as our message and our focus of, what is God's will for all of us, I'm hopeful for our future if we can do that. So prayer, meditation. Also, there are some podcasts that I think could be helpful for some, especially those with young kids or teens that are experiencing anxiety and some fear during this time. One of them, you can get them all on the iTunes, Apple podcast.
Yeah.
But one is called Go Zen, Mindful Minutes. Another is called Be Calm on Ahway Island, AHWAY Island. And then something that I use in my practice with children is these mindful kid cards. And it's 50 cards, and they all have a specific focus of mindfulness and meditation for children. And many of them focus on breathing and just different exercises. You can get them on Amazon. I think I've seen them at Walmart website maybe. But those are wonderful, and you can just fan it out and tell your child, pick one, and you can just practice mindfulness and meditation with them, and it can be a real gift
That's cool.
Because they start practicing it, that very young.
I want some of those too. I'm going to go back and listen to this so I can write down all these things you're saying because I need for them to be in my toolbox.
Yes.
But that's one of the things I've wondered, like, can my 2-year-old, center herself? And really she could, I think. She can take a deep breath in and out when she's angry. So
That's right.
maybe she could do that. It's the start of something maybe much larger that will grow over the years.
Those
that's
feelings
helpful.
books will help with that too.
Yeah, that's
yeah, I
great.
loved practicing that with my daughter when she was little, well, that little boy's angry, but they're not hitting and they're not saying mean things. And I mean, I have some really fun memories of us acting those things out. What would the unhelpful person do? What would the helpful person do with the feelings? It's fun.
That's a good.
Yeah.
Children's
Teaches a lot
books
too.
Teach children a lot. They also teach adults a lot.
they do.
I mean, they're good grounding kind of sources for all of us, I think. Well, where might parents turn to seek professional help for a counselor for themselves or for their child?
I would first start with, if you have insurance, health insurance, I would start with health insurance. And you can contact your health insurance company. On the back of your insurance card, there will be a number. And you can call the number and just say, I would like a list of providers that are contracted with the insurance. So any therapist has to actually fill out paperwork and get contracted with an insurance company to be able to bill for that service. And that's where I would start so that you can get those services paid for. And so your insurance company can send you a list via email of as many therapists as you want in the area. And then I would suggest looking at each therapist, and most therapists have a website. Go to the website, look at their credentials and their specialties and see if it fits you or your family's needs. And give them a call. And, if it's not a good match, try someone else. It's very similar to, making a friend. You're going to try to find somebody that you can really connect with and that you feel like hears you.
Yeah.
And once you have that, miracles can happen in therapy. It is just such a wonderful experience when it is a good match. So that's where I would start looking for someone.
That's great. That's really helpful.
Or word of mouth. If you have a friend who knows somebody and they really like them, do it that way too.
Yeah. So I imagine most counselors are still doing video conference.
Telehealth, yes.
Right now.
That is what we are all, many of us are still doing. I have heard there are some therapists seeing people face to face. I'm not sure how they're doing that. But yes, I know many large practices are still doing telehealth.
Yeah. So you can do it from the comfort of your own living room
That's right.
or kitchen table if you
Yes.
need it. That's great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, we're so grateful for your time this afternoon. And
Thank you for having me.
We have received so many questions ahead of time. I guess we've answered everybody's questions who maybe would have written in on YouTube. We don't have any live feed questions.
Wonderful.
But I am grateful. Thank y'all for watching,
Yes,
and we hope this
thank
has been
you.
helpful for you. I want to remind you that next Wednesday on June the 10th at noon, we will be having another live conversation with Dr. Bill Lee. So that will be a conversation with Dr. William Lee on racism in America and the aftermath of George Floyd's death. A very important and timely conversation. We're grateful for his willingness to come and talk with us. I give just a quick little closing blessing to anyone who is watching. We are grateful for you, and we ask that you be well and that God may keep you safe and give you peace in this time. Thank you.
Thank you.